And I'll see when I get back. And he's like, okay, Daddy, love you, and I'm going to...
You'll be advised of that. With regard to this proceeding, basically there are 4 elements that I have to receive information regarding.
Everybody, let's get out of here. Out! Watch it like criminal! The side of the federal building has been blown off. Jesse?
About a third of the building has been blown away. And you can see just smoke and debris and fire on the ground, downtown on the ground. This is just devastating. And we are uncertain what caused this explosion at this time. It happened around 9 o'clock. It was felt as far away as Channel 9. That's good, at least 5 miles from downtown.
This is an incredible picture. Half the building, a third of the building has been blown off, and we felt it here. We talk a lot about earthquakes. I've never felt one, but that felt like an earthquake this morning.
What they're mingling about.
The
traffic
building. It is a federal building, not the federal courthouse.
Okay, I want to pass this along. This is really important. It's the Murrah building in downtown Oklahoma City. Our understanding is it was the federal courthouse. It is not. It's the Murrah building in downtown Oklahoma City.
I guess see what happened, and I see ambulance and other emergency crews, EMSA crews, so I imagine they are assisting injured persons. But I cannot see if people are being brought out of the smoke.
Jesse, you know, this is an incredible picture. Half the building, a third of the building has been blown off, and we felt it here. We talk a lot about earthquakes. I've never felt one, but that felt like an earthquake this morning.
28 years ago, on April 19th of 1995, a veteran named Timothy McVeigh drove a Ryder truck stuffed with explosives into downtown Oklahoma City, and destroyed a federal office building, killing 168 people, including 19 children who were in the daycare. We know that within 90 minutes of the bombing, McVeigh was pulled over near the Kansas border and arrested alone at the wheel of a glaringly improbable getaway car, an ancient rust bucket of a Mercury sedan with no license plates, which made him a sitting duck for any passing highway patrolman. How could such a callous, carefully planned attack have come to such an abrupt end? After a vast investigation headed by the FBI, 3 trials mounted against McVeigh and his co-conspirator, Terry Nichols, and an avalanche of court documents, there is still no definitive answer to that question. Perhaps the most striking thing about the Oklahoma City bombing, by far, the most destructive act perpetrated by a homegrown assailant against fellow Americans, is not how much we've learned over the past 28 years, but rather how much we still do not know. Despite the government's insistence that the case has been solved, we don't know the exact origin of the plot or how many people carried it out. The federal indictment against McVeigh and Nichols, the latter fronted the money and did most of the bomb's construction for McVeigh, made specific mentions of others unknown. And when their trials were almost over, the presiding judge publicly urged the FBI and other law enforcement agencies to keep investigating. The plea fell largely on deaf ears. We don't know how McVeigh and Nichols learned to build a fertilizer bomb of such size and power. We don't know the identities of the other people seen with McVeigh on the morning of the bombing, only that 20 or more eyewitnesses told the FBI that he was not alone. There is no ready explanation for a different Ryder truck seen by witnesses at McVeigh's motel in Kansas and at the state park where the bomb was assembled in the week leading up to the bombing. No explanation for other people seen inside McVeigh's motel room during the same period. No satisfactory explanation of the fact that 2 people were seen renting the bomb truck on April 17th, neither of them entirely fitting McVeigh's description. An examination of the official investigative files on the Oklahoma City bombing, about 1 million pages of material, does little to bolster the assertion of Frank Keating, the former FBI agent who was the Oklahoma governor in 1995. And Frank Keating said, quote, 2 evil men did this and 2 evil men paid. Rather, it does the opposite. The impression confirmed by the memories of the frontline investigators and the lawyers who prosecuted the case, but did not speak independently about it for many years, is of leads left dangling or shut down instead of being pursued with the FBI's customary vigor. Obvious suspects were offered deals by government prosecutors, usually but not always in exchange for their testimony. Others slithered down the priority list until they were lost or forgotten. Half a dozen right-wing radicals fingered as possible suspects by the government informants or by fellow anti-government warriors were not questioned about the bombing, even when it became clear that they had lied about their whereabouts on April 19th. A bigger issue, which would reemerge in the wake of the 9/11 attacks, was interagency rivalry. In 1995, the FBI and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms were both monitoring the radical far right. But trust between the two was at rock bottom following a disastrous ATF raid 2 years earlier on a religious compound outside of Waco, Texas, and an ensuing FBI-led siege that ended with the place burning to the ground. More than 80 people died. In early 1995, the ATF didn't tell the FBI that they had an informant inside a remote community in eastern Oklahoma, that the informant had reported talk of bombings, and that the ATF, afraid of triggering another Waco, had decided to pull the informant rather than act on her information. McVeigh telephoned that community, Elahome City, 2 weeks before the informant was shut down. And there are multiple indications he came visiting days later in search of recruits. John Magaw, who was the ATF director in 95, said in a 2010 interview with The Guardian that if the informant had been kept on, the bomb plot may have been thwarted. The FBI, meanwhile, had its own troubled history with Elahome City. Since influential players in both agencies were reluctant to open that can of worms, it remained largely unopened. To the fury of investigators, including Danny Deffenbaugh, who ran the task force for more than 2 years, Danny says, quote, "When you get agencies working together in a joint task force, they should be holding hands, not keeping their fingers crossed behind their backs. Sometimes dealing with other players in this is like pulling teeth from a toothless tiger." The Justice Department felt pressure to win what was turning into a frustratingly circumstantial case, especially against McVeigh. Prosecutors knew McVeigh was guilty and were pretty sure it was his idea to park the truck bomb directly beneath the daycare at the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. Their challenge, though, was to prove it without raising significant questions about others they could not catch, or whose involvement they could not demonstrate beyond a reasonable doubt. And so a month into the investigation, the desire to keep looking for other suspects or sniff around other places like Elahome City started giving way to contrary impulse not to overcomplicate the story or give ammunition to defense at trial. Even as the government struggled to find conclusive evidence that McVeigh had been at the key locations in the bomb plot or had been there with nobody but Nichols, his role was expanded in the official narrative from leading suspect to solo mastermind. Scott Mendeloff, one of McVeigh's prosecutors, said, quote, "If you convicted him but did not get the death penalty, that would not be okay. We could not lose this. It was like a pressure cooker." They did not lose. An unrepentant McVeigh chose in the end to speed up his own death sentence. He waived his right to further appeals, reinforced the government's mastermind theory of the bombing, and went to the execution chamber in 2001. And it's not just conspiracy theorists who doubt McVeigh dreamed up the plot by himself and carried it out with just Terry Nichols for help. Larry Mackey, the number 2 prosecutor against McVeigh and the lead prosecutor against Terry Nichols, acknowledged his team did not entirely believe it either. He says, and I quote, "If you had said to us, anybody in the room 100% confident that McVeigh was alone, raise your hand. We all would have kept our hands in our laps. Mackey told this to The Guardian in 2010. But the official narrative of the bombing is incomplete or wrong. What really happened? One thing the prosecutors stripped away at the trial was the vital context of the radical anti-government movement, which in the early 90s was in ferment over what it saw as fascist government tactics at Waco and a mountainside siege at Ruby Ridge, Idaho, in which a government sharpshooter killed the wife of a survivalist, Randy Weaver, while she was holding her 14-month-old baby. In 1992, a man named Louis Beam, described by a senior ATF investigator as, quote, the most dangerous man in America, gave a speech to fellow radicals calling for, quote, 1,000 points of resistance. It was time, he said, to fertilize the tree of liberty with the blood of both patriot and tyrants. This line was almost identical to the slogan that McVeigh had on his T-shirt when he was arrested. In 1994, Louis Beam, told a career criminal named Roy Bird, who later told the FBI that, quote, something big would happen in Oklahoma City, Denver, or Dallas on 19 of April, 1995, the second anniversary of the fire that ended the Waco siege. Quote, they've got some kid who's going to do something, end quote, Beam reportedly said. The government never interviewed Beam to find out more. The original plan, according to several sources, including an FBI informant, had been to blow up not the Murrah building, but the federal courthouse next door. And this was reported early on. They thought it was the federal courthouse that had been blown up. And then within about 10-15 minutes, they reported that it was, in fact, the Murrah building. The two buildings shared an underground garage, and McVeigh's crew was supposed to plant the bomb there. Much as Ramzi Youssef had planted a fertilizer bomb beneath the World Trade Center in New York 2 years earlier, an attack McVeigh had studied. The original plan, according to several sources, including an FBI... Oh, whoops, I already read that. The Ryder truck was first seen downtown around 8 a.m., 50 minutes before McVeigh later claimed to have arrived, but could not get into the garage because the truck was too tall. There followed a nerve-wracking hour in which people and vehicles associated with the Ryder truck were spotted several times around downtown and adjoining neighborhoods. Plan B was apparently to park the truck in an alley between the federal courthouse and the old post office building, site of Oklahoma's main bankruptcy court, but the truck had to back out of the alley, said multiple sources, because a U.S. Marshals Service truck was already there dropping off a prisoner. Parking the bomb in the handicap spot directly below the daycare center was Plan C, and as far as anyone could tell, McVeigh's idea alone. If, as seems likely, McVeigh was left suddenly alone at this point, the 18-year-old Mercury Marquis may have been the only car available to him. Everything about it, including the missing license plates and the propaganda materials left on the front passenger seat, suggests it was meant to be kept close to the bomb site and provide a, quote, signature for the attack. It became a getaway car only as a desperation measure. Who were the other people seen with McVeigh? We don't know, although members of McVeigh's subculture have certainly pointed fingers at residents of Elohim City, at a chemist living in the Arizona desert whom McVeigh tried to recruit, and at a white supremacist punk rocker turned bank robber named Kevin McCarthy, who lied twice to the FBI about his whereabouts on April 19th, but whose information was not shared with the bombing task force because he was being relied upon as a government witness in a bank robbery case. We don't know the identities of the original John Doe 1 and John Doe 2, the people who rented the bomb truck under an alias in Junction City, Kansas, and whose sketches were circulated widely in the days after the bombing. The FBI could never convincingly show how McVeigh got to the rental shop himself from a McDonald's, where he was captured on surveillance shortly before the timestamp on the rental agreement. It's possible that whoever did rent the truck played no further part in the conspiracy. What we do know is that the government showed little interest in answering these questions once the case against McVeigh and Nichols was set. The Clinton administration wanted convictions and quote-unquote closure. The FBI director, Louis Freeh, was engaged in a war against many of his own senior investigators over personality clashes. Some of the FBI's best and brightest were either distracted or preventing from doing what should have been done, what should have been the crowning job of their careers. Oklahoma City has come to be overshadowed, of course, by the even bigger atrocities of 9/11 and everything that has followed. It is, in many ways, Americans' forgotten tragedy, and that constitutes a failure in and of itself. So with that being said, I want to show you guys a few clips. I want to kind of focus on the others unknown. And here is our first clip.
We'll go ahead and repeat one more time for you the all points bulletin from the Oklahoma City Police. They're looking for 2, perhaps 3, most likely 2 Middle Eastern men, last seen wearing blue jogging suits and traveling in a brown pickup truck with tinted windows. There you see a printed out version of, in fact, this is a little more exact than of what we've had already. Apparently the first one, 20 to 25 years old. The second one, a little older, 35 to 38 years old. The third suspect, if indeed there is one, would have been simply a driver in this entire incident. And we should keep in mind, we don't know necessarily that the people that they are looking for at the Plaza Inn in southeast Oklahoma City are necessarily what we would term suspects yet. They are people, however, though, that the police would very much like to talk to.
Also part of the Kingman connection, this mail service, which agents think McVeigh used to try to sell anti-tank weapons under an alias through this ad. Also using the same mail drop, a man who employees think might be the elusive John Doe number 2.
I didn't really talk to him. It just gave him his mail and he left.
Investigators are back.
John Doe 2. CNN interviews with those who claim they've known or seen him in and around Junction City, Kansas, paint a picture of an ex-Fort Riley soldier with a thick accent, Southern, perhaps from Louisiana, who frequented this Junction City bar, as well as this one, who checked out of this nearby motel the day before the bombing, and at about the same time was seen with this man, John Doe number 1, Timothy McVeigh, at this storage shed in Harrington, Kansas, and at this convenience store near there.
Never been so scared in all my life.
The clerk at this store, a block from the home of McVeigh associate Terry Nichols, told the FBI that McVeigh and John Doe 2 were here the Monday night before the bombing.
When you saw that sketch, were you like, what did you think? I was scared to death. I knew it was him when I saw him.
Earlier that day, the same day that McVeigh and John Doe 2 rented the Ryder truck from this Junction City body shop, handyman Bob Ray claims he saw them at this storage shed, believed to have been rented by Terry Nichols.
Right. That was in that unit right there.
Which number? A retired Harrington, Kansas police officer, Ray says the 2 suspects had a Ryder truck backed up to this shed.
Right up to the back here.
Uh-huh.
And you couldn't see what it was taken out or putting in.
Later that day, Monday, John Doe 2 is believed to have checked into this Junction City motel, driving a Ryder truck. The manager and desk clerk were reluctant to be interviewed on camera, but the clerk says the man had a thick, distinctive accent that sounded Southern. A similar accent described by trucker Bob Ham, who says he saw a man strongly resembling the sketch at this Junction City bar on several occasions.
I still hope that doesn't turn out to be him.
The man who Ham last saw 2 months ago said he was a soldier at Fort Riley. Patrons at this Junction City GI hangout also believe that John Doe 2 was a soldier. The sketch, they say, matches a man they knew.
As far as I can say his accent, I'd have to say majorly Southern accent.
They say he claimed to be recently discharged from Fort Riley and was also recently divorced. They last saw him about 2 months ago when he was thrown out of the club.
He was really upset and shouting obscenities at people, and he just made a really big scene.
Last time you saw him?
That was the last time I'd seen him.
It is unclear how many, if any, of these people actually saw the bombing accomplice. But in this town, where the FBI knows the truck was rented and where it knows Timothy McVeigh spent much time, what people have to say is taken seriously until proven otherwise.
And the FBI says it has some surveillance camera video of the bomb site, but once more,
we are urging anyone with security video cameras, particularly those located in convenience stores and restaurants that were operating in the area near the time of the blast and have preserved that tape, to contact the FBI hotline.
And the burials have also begun at this
On that note, I want to read back through and see if you guys have any questions about anything that we've gone through. I mean, I know it's a lot. It's a lot to unpack. But no, I'm totally open to answering any questions if I can. I don't know everything, but I know a lot. I can at least try to answer any questions, or I want to read your comments. Melanie says, I remember this like it was yesterday. I had a premonition dream that night. It freaks me out to this day. That is scary. And you're not annoying, Mandy. Is who a senator? That news reporter, here's Potato. The news reporter literally said the wrong place, like they were preempting it happening there, but it didn't. Oh, Jammers. I'm glad you're here. Jammers, before I forget, I never answered your question last night in the Q&A. I laid down last night to watch Daybell, and I'm like, oh, I didn't answer Jammer's question about 4 people, alive or dead, that I would want to have dinner with. And so I was sitting there thinking about it, and I'm like, okay, this is one dinner. Like, I'd like to have several dinners, but at this one dinner, I'd like to have Tim McVeigh, because I'd like to ask him what the fuck happened and what his actual role was. Because when he was in the military, he was accepted into the special ops. And according to him, he went to, him and 9 others went to another base, and they were briefed that they were going to be government-paid assassins. Aw, Shelley Brook. Crazy. So Tim McVeigh, because I'd like to ask him what happened. All right, now this is going to show us Waco. We're going to stop there. Go back. I mean, the damage, too, was something that was under scrutiny, that one truck bomb did this damage and made these floors pancake. And that's why I wanted to go over with you guys the World Trade Center and, you know, the other Ruby Ridge, because that's what led up to all of this, and Waco. And there's just a lot. It's a lot. And there was a lot of white supremacist things going on in the 90s. There was the militias. Michigan militia was being infiltrated by the feds because they thought they were some dangerous organization. It was crazy. So Tim McVeigh, because I want to know what the hell happened. I want to get John McAfee and Elon Musk in the same fucking room. So those two. And then I want to add Jim Morrison, the poet, in, because I think that would be like the most interesting dinner ever. So John McAfee, Elon Musk, Jim Morrison, and Tim McVeigh all coming over for dinner. And we're going to freaking talk about all this stuff. We're going to talk about AI. We're going to talk about just technology. We're going to peel off Elon's mask and see if he's alien. It sounds like a great dinner party. Yes, absolutely. You're all invited. Timothy McVeigh read about explosives while at Fort Benning and how to build them. Oh my God. You're going to have to give Potato, you're invited, but John McAfee says you have to go in the hammock.
In the name of Jesus, Father God, Lord.
So, Jammers, I hope I didn't disappoint with my 24-hour delay on my answer, or my 16-hour delay on my answer. All right, so let me show you a few more of these clips. They're pretty eye-opening. Here is the video about the ATF informant.
36 hours after the bombing, the FBI, pursuing all possible leads, calls Carol Howe and her ATF handler, Angela Finley, to FBI crime scene headquarters in Oklahoma City.
Carol Howe fills the FBI investigators in on what she knew about Elohim City. She reports that several people who frequent Elohim City, including Strassmeyer and Mahon, have made several trips to look at federal buildings in Oklahoma City.
Did you see that guy?
Angela Finley.
Why is he given the Hitler sign in front of a Ryder truck? See, this is the kind of people, this is the kind of people, too, that are in Idaho. They have these cells, these white supremacist cells in Idaho as well.
Look at federal buildings in Oklahoma City. Angela Finley and ATF tells the FBI the nature of the people that live there, the violent tendencies, that they hate the government, that they're planning violence against government property and government agents. All of these things were provided to Angela Finley and ATF from Carol Howe when she was employed as a confidential informant.
I had first seen Finley's reports were after the bombing.
These first reports are so pivotal in the bombing investigation. It was like everything was shoved under the rugs. Okay, here's this. J.D. Cash. This guy was part of the Oklahoma Bombing Investigation Committee. I have their book. They have it's called The Final Report. They did an extensive go-over of the bombing investigation. It was Charles Key, who was a senator at the time, J.D. Cash, and then there were some victims who didn't think they were getting the truth from the government and getting the whole story. They joined the investigation committee. It was a big deal. And they were all like painted as conspiracy theorists. It was really, really sad to watch. But this is talking about how the Murrah building housed the ATF and the FBI and how they had weapons and things stored in the Murrah building. And they're saying there was speculation that there were other bombs. And it was speculated that maybe they had stuff stored in there that once the bomb exploded, that's why they chased everyone away and said, bomb, bomb. And they were removing other, people saw them removing other bombs from the building. So you can't dispute it. There was too many people that saw it. Just like the John Doe 2. There was like 25 people who saw this dude with Tim. And they've never identified the guy.
Following that initial interview with Dr. Brown back on the 1st of May, I talked to Dick Miller, who's the assistant fire marshal for the Oklahoma City Fire Marshal's office. And he, in very clear terms, readily admitted that there were explosives removed from the Murrah building immediately after the disaster on the very same morning. And it was those explosions, it was those devices that were removed from the Murrah building which caused the evacuation of the rescue workers on at least 3 different occasions. And it's important for people to understand that while they are in the process of removing these explosives, people are left bleeding to death and dying. This was a very real situation. I know now, as we have all heard since, that the new story that comes out from the ATF and the FBI is that these were nothing but training devices. Most absolutely ludicrous excuse. That if anyone believes that, they're overlooking the very simple and obvious fact that experts went into that building, experts removed police, fire, and civilian rescuers and moved them blocks away while they endeavored to remove all of these explosive devices. Dick Miller told me that the 1030, we'll call it bomb scare, was related to a 2-foot by 2-foot by 2-foot box marked high explosives. In a subsequent interview with another reporter, he explained that he watched the bomb squad haul that off, load that up and haul it off, and what it was percussion caps. And these are percussion caps that are used for C4. I have speculated early that the ATF, Secret Service, and DEA was likely storing explosives illegally in the building in their arsenal rooms. Sure enough, as time goes by, witnesses come forward, I have discovered that indeed the DEA and the ATF had arsenal rooms on the 9th floor. I've obtained photographs of the ATF arsenal room. I have 4 different live witnesses on tape who have said that they watched the ATF unload their arsenal room 2 weeks after the blast. They helped them load different devices, firearms of every firearm known to man, hundreds of thousands of rounds of ammunition, explosives, boxes marked explosives, tow missiles, hand grenades, just about everything short of a T-72 Russian tank was in that building. But the most important thing is that they were storing devices that were high explosives that did not belong in a public building.
And not only don't belong in a public building, but a public building that houses a daycare. A daycare. Why would you have a daycare in the same building as the ATF? The alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. Why? It doesn't make sense. It's just so stupid. Let's see what else. Oh, this is great. 38-second clip.
I remind everyone that John Doe number 2 remains at large. He should be considered armed and extremely dangerous. There is a strong likelihood that other persons are involved in this tragedy as well. People should not attempt to take any action against John Doe number 2 or anyone else involved in this matter. But we continue to urge anyone with information to call 1-800-905-1514.
Let me say how very proud I am of the
I remind everyone.
Craziness, isn't it? I mean, what happened to John Doe number 2? And where is the surveillance they say they have? Oh, we saw it.
The morning of April 19th, I was working at Johnny's Tire Store.
This is great. This is like something we would see nowadays. This guy right here worked at a tire shop in downtown Oklahoma City, and his claim is that he gave directions to McVeigh and saw another man. And he straight up, tell me if you believe him or not. Let's listen to his account.
The morning of April 19th, I was working at Johnny's Tire Store. At about approximately 8:25, a Ryder truck pulled up into my place of business. At that time, a gentleman asked me for directions to 5th and Harvey. I proceeded to explain the location of where he was asking me. He seemed to be a little concerned of where I was telling him about. At that time, the gentleman, Timothy McVeigh, stepped out of the truck. I walked him over to, let's say, 10, 11 feet away from the truck itself. I pointed a direction downtown, which is to my right. He seemed to acknowledge where I was talking about. At that time, the gentleman walked back to the truck. I talked to him. I also noticed there was a passenger in the truck at that time. From that point in time, the Ryder truck seemed to stay there about another 5 minutes and headed the direction I explained where it was at.
What did the person in the truck look like?
The person in the truck looked to more be of a Caucasian, Middle Eastern, was not an African American, he was not a real light complected. He was not blonde hair, light skinned. He, at that time, he, like I said, they didn't stay very much longer. I didn't.
Wearing a cap?
At that, yes. Also, he was wearing a ball cap. Timothy McVeigh had his on backwards, which just like this. It was on his head. The other gentleman had his on like this. They really didn't acknowledge me so much. They didn't really seem that they were that concerned. They didn't seem nervous. They seemed to be more lost. They came in from the west. They pulled into our business, kind of a catty-corner angle. From there, they proceeded right to go south downtown area.
How far is Johnny's Tire Company from the Merle building?
I'm located on 10th and Hudson. The bombing took place on 5th and Harvey. That would seem 1 block over, 5 blocks down. I'm to the north side of the bombing. 4 days after the bombing, or 3 days after the bombing, the government took me downtown to identify the gentleman. Under what I can understand, I did identify the gentleman as being Timothy McVeigh.
Did they have the passenger, which was with McVeigh? Was he in a lineup also?
No, he was not. At that time, I've never even actually seen, at that time, before the John Doe actually 2 number come out, I'd never even seen a photo, a sketch, nothing like that. And also, when I did identify Timothy McVeigh, I had not even seen him. The only way I'd ever seen him was through a sketch on a paper at Daily Oklahoma.
What's your motivation for telling the American people what you have right now? Are you in this for money?
I'm not in this for anything but to let people know that this is what I've seen. I feel at this point in time that I will, or should I say I might be a witness in the bombing itself, but as far as me actually being motivated for any other reason, I have none. I just want to let people understand this is what I seen that day. You know, and then nothing's going to change my mind whether I testify or not. This is what I seen that day.
So do you guys believe him? I fully believe him. I think he has no reason to lie. And it's not like he was all over going on Dr. Phil and shows. Here's another clip for you. Here's a special agent from the FBI, retired.
It wasn't until after I left the case, some months later, that I know that FBI headquarters told them to close down the investigation on Oklahoma City, which has some very significant connections to Mr. McVeigh and to previous bombing attempts. So I don't know why they did that. That's something that, and it's very unusual. And never in my career did I ever have FBI headquarters tell me not to investigate something. They would often suggest things to do or courses of action to follow or other leads we may have missed, but I never had them ever say, don't investigate that part of the case. That was a total aberration to me.
So it could be, that this whole thing seems hinky because they had, like I told you in the very beginning, they had the ATF and the FBI was like, against each other due to Waco. Waco was horrible. God, there's so many other people you could talk about, but okay, hey, check this out. Stephen Colburn.
Tonight arrested Stephen Garrett Colburn, a man sought in connection with the bombing of the Oklahoma City Federal Building 3.5 weeks ago.
Well, that arrest came in the Arizona town of Oatman. FBI agents say Colburn may have been the man driving a brown pickup that was traveling in tandem with primary bombing suspect Timothy McVeigh the day of the blast. But as Phil Schumann reports, Colburn's father says it can't be true.
Until somebody shows me, I don't believe my son was involved in that. So.
Robert Colburn, a well-respected Oxnard dentist, greeted the news with disbelief that his son may have somehow been involved in the Oklahoma City bombing.
Steve has always been a gentle person who has not hurt anyone as far as we know. We never had any problems with him. We do not think he ever had any problems with the law.
Stephen Garrett Colburn has had problems, both personal and with the law. Brought up in Oxnard, the one-time Eagle Scout graduated from Oxnard High School in 1978, a straight-A student.
He was very cooperative. He was never a problem. He was very cooperative.
He went on to UCLA, leaving with a degree in biochemistry. He was later employed at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center doing DNA research. But things began to unravel for Colburn in the late 80s. There was a divorce, then bankruptcy, then a 1994 arrest on a weapons charge. He eventually skipped bail and became a fugitive. His last contact with his family was on September 17, 1994, at the wedding of his sister. Family members have lost complete contact with the man since then, but steadfastly refuse to believe he has had anything to do with Timothy McVeigh.
No, I don't believe it. I just, it appears to me that somebody's looking for a patsy.
The death toll in the Oklahoma City Federal Building bombing rose again tonight, incidentally, up now to 168. A man hospitalized for his injuries suffered in the bombing April 19th died tonight.
Yeah, so there was a lot of people looked into. I mean, this was There was definitely someone else, in my opinion, that was there.
Even when I knew I never could, know that
You guys do believe the tire guy. I do too. I do too. Why would you, okay, Mandy Joe, why would you have a daycare at a place where U.S. Marshals are bringing in criminals? I think that courthouse was across the street, but at any rate, it's not a safe place for a daycare. It just seems really stupid to me. I don't quite understand. But we do have, let's see. We're going to show you a little bit of footage from the World Trade Center. Oh, this guy here, let's talk about him for a minute. Hang on. There's Tim McVeigh with his bulletproof vest. Look at that dude's hands. Holy. Look at the size of his hands. Did you guys see the size of his feet in this thumbnail? I was like, holy shit. Don't all these photos and videos look so old? But like, they're not that old. But they look old. We've really come a long way. We've really come a long way since the 90s in technology. It's weird. But let's talk about this guy. And he was in the trailer you guys saw. And I want to give tons and tons of props to Potato. I think Potato needs to go into editing. She did a great job on that trailer. And you saw this guy at the end. There was not only McVeigh Nichols, but there was a third man. And his name is Michael Fortier. Michael Fortier was also in the military with Tim and Terry. Michael Fortier knew all about the bombing. He knew about the storage unit. He had gone to the storage unit for McVeigh. What else did he do? His wife knew as well. He knew all the plans. He saw the diagram, supposedly. So anyways, the feds got him to climb on their side for new identity. So Michael Fortier was prosecuted as a conspirator, and he served 12 years. And then when he got out, him and his wife got new identities. So Lori Fortier, his wife, never was charged, but she got a new identity. So from what their attorney did an interview, I think 2 years ago, and he said that their life is hard. I think once you're in the grips with a new identity and witness protection, you're never free. I think they use you for other things. That's just my speculation. But I do think that they use, I mean, why wouldn't they? They're putting you in witness protection, giving you a new identity when you committed a crime. You think they're going to like kiss your ass after it's all said and done? I think that they use you for other things from your knowledge and shit. But anyways, they're living it with new identities, which can't be fun, with 2 children now. They have 2 kids. So, that's him. Weird, huh? All right. Now, another random fun fact. I used to write with Terry Nichols back in the day. And all he would talk about was God. And I stopped writing him because he didn't want to talk about the bombing at all. Like at all. He wouldn't even talk about it. He would send me scriptures and ask me about my family dynamics and tell me about how the man should be, the leader of the family. And I was just like, dude, I don't need moral lessons from you. I want to know about the fucking bombing. But he is in the Supermax in Florence, Colorado, in solitary. So he's been in solitary confinement since the 90s. He's got to be losing his fucking mind by now. And the weird thing is, I had a dream the other night that he passed away. But I think it was because I was researching all this. But I had this dream and I was like, oh my God, because I've been thinking about writing to him again. Now that all this time has passed, I haven't written him since like 98. Or maybe it was 2000. 2000. But here's some random facts about him. So he traveled to the Philippines at least 5 times before the bombing. He, hang on, I got to send a cash app to somebody. Hold on. There we go. He traveled there, and he also brought back a mail order bride. So he made it seem like, he went there for that. Well, it turns out in the research, in the investigation, that Terry Nichols was in the Philippines at the same time as Ramzi Youssef. And Ramzi Youssef was the mastermind, according to the feds, behind the World Trade Center bombing of 1992. So we're going to learn a little bit about the World Trade Center bombing. This was the same type of thing. It was a truck bomb. It was parked in the basement of the garage. So when you think about how Tim could have had the option to put that bomb in a garage of the courthouse, he didn't. It had been done 2 years prior, and it wasn't successful in the way that they wanted it to be. So I almost see this as a precursor for Oklahoma. In my opinion, it's too coincidental. And thank you guys for listening this morning and sharing my passion with me.
World Trade Center Tower number 1 became a tower of smoke. Hundreds of workers and visitors were first stunned by the sound of the explosion, then attacked by clouds of fumes and debris.
If there's somebody trapped out there, what must they be going through right now?
Panic, a feeling of total isolation, the forgottenness. The world has just forgotten them and they're all on their own.
7 hours after the rescue and evacuation effort began, emergency workers were worried some people might still be trapped in the uppermost floors of the 110-story Twin Towers. All afternoon, they'd climbed the stairs going floor to floor. Early on, it was a slow process, trying to get thousands of people out through smoke and darkness.
We will go every floor, floor by floor. You have a methodical type of, search, and you make certain that you cover every area, and every elevator has to be open. We have to make certain that there's no one in those elevators.
The rescue effort was more grisly and difficult down below, near the epicenter of the violent blast. That's where firefighters saw people dead trapped in their cars, and where they found themselves having to rescue one of their own.
We were searching for people, and all of a sudden the floor wasn't there. It fell into a hole, about 60 feet. He's got 2 broken legs, and I hope he's going to be all right.
We could hear some guy yelling to us on the other side of this tremendous hole. I imagine he could hear us. We were trying to make a racket. My company was trying to work around this tremendous hole to get to him. We were unable to. The structural damage is tremendous.
We have people in a wheelchair. We had no help for them at all. Nothing. We're walking down dark, pitch dark, escape, stairways. There's no fresh air at all. We were up there for 2.5 hours.
We were pretty much on our own. There was no fire alarm or anything like that up there. Just there was a loud bang and the building kind of shook. And there really wasn't anybody up there.
There was a man still sitting in his car, and you could tell he was dead. And I didn't even get close to him, because as we were getting into that area, our man got hurt, and that's what we were concerned with. But as far as I know, he was dead.
I was sitting in my chair, and all of a sudden I just felt an explosion. I flew out of my chair, and they just made us evacuate the building within like 15 minutes.
I actually saw the wall shaking. I thought it was an earthquake or something. Like all the computers went off, everything just went off. It sounded like a bomb or a bang or something, or a pop. I can't really explain it. We were on the 25th floor and going down till about, I'd say the 10th flight. There wasn't that much smoke. From 10 all the way down to 1, you couldn't really see anything at all, and it was dark, and people had flashlights, and they just helped everybody out of the building.
There was somewhat panic, but we just kept following everybody else down the stairs, and everyone was going faster, and just telling everybody to cover your mouth and keep your head down. But it just kept getting darker and smokier as we further went down.
Explosion and fire happened in an underground basement.
The fire was concentrated in one area, in that B2 level, and what they were trying to do is to deal with the people that were trapped in the other areas because of the smoke condition in the upper floor.
That place is a death trap. Let me tell you something. There was smoke where there shouldn't be smoke. I was on the 107th floor, and we heard the bang, and that place filled up in 5 minutes.
Well, first we was told to go down the wrong stairwell. Then we came back and went down the right stairwell.
Built stairway. It was tough to breathe, very tough to breathe. Coming down the stairs, your eyes were burning.
Nobody was spared from the smoke-filled climb down the stairs. One after another, pregnant women emerged, some after inhaling the smoke inside for hours.
You were with 2 women. 2 women, one of them 2 pregnant women, and I was taking the rest down. We were making a chain down with the pregnant women.
There was no announcement as far as what to do.
We just started tearing down the stairs.
The hallways filled up with smoke, and we blew out of there.
We put our hand on the shoulder of the person in front of us, and then in an orderly manner we went down the stairs. Everyone did extremely well. Of course, I was in the Dean Witter group, but no one panicked. There was no screaming when the lights went out, and it was very orderly. We went down, it seems like maybe, I don't know, half a dozen flights like this in the pitch blackness until we saw a fireman somewhere around the 30th floor.
2 dead victims, literally hundreds of injured, and at least 15 hurt seriously by flying debris.
Watch out, watch out, watch out!
Come on, sweetheart. Come on.
The 2 kindergarten classes were finally home after a day filled with worried parents and frightened kids, some of whom spent 3 hours on the frigid, snowy World Trade Center roof 110 floors above Manhattan before walking the entire way down the stairs. But the other class was trapped in a dark and smoky elevator, unable to let anybody know where they were.
First I hear they're outside waiting for the bus can't get to them. Then I hear that it's not confirmed they're out of the building, that they're in the building. Now I hear they're being escorted down the stairs.
In the elevator.
All the kids, we have 17 kids and 5 adults.
Did the smoke get into the elevator?
Yeah, we have all the kids with all the smoke all around their nose. We have it in their throats, you know.
Did you know what had happened?
No. We still don't really know what happened.
The kids sang and prayed for 5 hours while the teacher and chaperones became more and more worried that no one would rescue them. Finally, firefighters found them stuck near the 35th floor.
I was a little scared.
What did you do all that time? You were there for 5 hours.
You cried. You cried?
I cried.
The only thing I was thinking about was my child. Yes, that's all.
What did you think when you saw her coming off the bus?
I was happy that she was all right. And I'm glad she with me today.
The elevator broke down, so we had to stay there for about 6 hours.
When you were in it?
Yeah.
What did you do in there for 6 hours?
We panicked.
The kids told their parents how they were packed in like sardines, all 50 of them. 3 chaperones and 2 tourists from California in one elevator in pitch darkness.
They had cigarette lighters, and on and off they would give us light. And that's all the kids wanted, was a little bit of light. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. I wanted a little bit of light, then we shut it off. And thank God that we were able to get the elevator doors open for air.
Evelyn?
The children were so brave, I couldn't believe it. We had some crying jags here and there. We had a couple of kids with asthma. But all in all, they were really unbelievable.
Standing on a roof with about 300 people, that's the biggest complaint was they had no way of, nobody knew anything. Nobody knew where to go, what to do, nothing.
Tonight, they are safe after being treated for smoke inhalation, but they're not very happy with New York City.
I hate it. I'll never come back. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I really don't like it. I mean, I don't know. I just feel like no one knows what's going on here. No one knows where they're at and how to get anywhere, and I'm just really miserable. But maybe I've just had a bad experience.
And as Melissa and Paul were trapped on the roof, firefighter Bill Chupa was battling his way through black smoke in the lobby of the building. He says that it was like walking into the Twilight Zone.
It was like an apocalypse, I guess you could say. It was a very heavy, dense smoke situation.
Crazy, isn't it? They don't want you to remember this. Because I think it was the precursor to OKC, to be honest with you. This was a huge deal. I mean, when you look at this footage.
Covered. We can't confirm that because.
Wait, hold on. There's a little more footage here. Look at this. It's insane.
It was a chaotic situation with a mixture of people that were on the streets with people who were being evacuated out of the building, so it was hard to assess who was injured, who wasn't, and get that sorted out early on.
For those stuck way upstairs, sorting it out was secondary to getting out.
We heard a loud bang and the building shook. And that, I mean, you know, the 110-story building, and that shakes. That was scary.
There's an enormous crater that's been formed, but the explosion was clearly a huge explosion. There's a lot of debris in the crater. It's building materials. It's cars caught on fire that were in the garage. There are mechanical systems, pipes from the steam system were blown up.
In terms of what caused the explosion, we still don't know yet. It is possible, but we can't confirm that because we haven't been down there to see what the actual cause was. We do know that it was a tremendous explosion.
What you guys been doing up there for the last several hours?
Basically sitting around in the dark.
Could you not get to a stairway?
Actually, we could, but it was too dark to come down.
It would have had no access to elevators. Power went off. Everything was smoky. We opened up the elevator 1A. There were 10 people laying on the floor. It was amazing. And They were all semi-conscious. The only noise we heard was one woman cry. And they were all in need. We threw our masks on them and called for oxygen. And the last report is a couple of people are still in serious condition. But it was amazing. Our husband and wife said goodbye to each other.
The husband and wife team, it was incredible. When we opened the door up, they were all laying there. It was like it was an incredible sight.
All the other elevators that we'd open up, the people came running
These
out.
poor
The people
guys.
in this elevator just kind of laid there. They didn't think they were going to come out.
Early.
We've treated and released 119 of them, and probably half a dozen or so have been already admitted to the hospital and brought upstairs, and a number of others, probably as many as a dozen more, are very likely to be kept overnight for continued observation.
I fell down onto the ground, and I noticed next thing I know, a ceiling tile was falling on top of me, and I was like covered with some ceiling tile and construction debris.
I just heard the bang. I got flipped up in the air, and then everything came down on me.
It was hard to see anything. It was just like all smoke and just you could barely see where you were going.
Did you see any of your other colleagues? Were they hurt?
No, just smoke inhalation, but I hope everybody got out all right.
Police say that it may in fact have been a bomb, a massive bomb.
Inside the garage. And we're also told now that there are 4 people confirmed
We've
dead.
called this the terror at the tower, and it's made even more so by the fact that it was an explosive device. And from now on, people in New York are going to feel even more vulnerable than they've ever felt before.
I'm monitoring because door opens up, post 1 is standing there, I'll never forget this. And he said there's a woman on the phone, an embassy employee, who's terrified because there's somebody in her front yard. Spoke to her, she said there's somebody in her front yard who banged on the door, got her attention, she came to the door, she wouldn't let him in, that had a bag and a magazine saying he knows something. I walked down and told them what had happened and said, I think this woman she's terrified, number 1. Number 2, we don't know who it is. He does not appear to be armed, but he's nervous, scared, he's frantic too. He's just as bad as she is. So Bill and I went out to the house, walked through the front gate, and sure enough, there was this individual standing there, and he was pacing. I'll never forget. And,
so this is, to clarify, they blamed it on Ramzi Youssef. And this is the story from the Department of Defense or whatever, from the government, that how they captured him. So they're saying that a woman in Pakistan was terrified because this dude was in her yard. So they get this information, and this dude flies there to Pakistan and joins the people from the embassy or whatever. And then they go to this woman's house. So just to give you guys a little backstory.
that's when he told us that he knew where this particular person was. And he had a Newsweeker Time in his possession, and he pointed to the picture that was inside up Periscope, which will tell which magazine it was, of Yusuf. He says, I know where he is. Anytime we got information related to that individual, to Ramzi Youssef, we took it seriously. We followed up as best we could. 9 times out of 10, and there had been 9 times or so before this, it had been nothing. This 10th time, we were very fortunate. He admitted being involved in a future attack with Ramzi Youssef.
Omar Abdel-Rahman caught the attention of the FBI following the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center in New York, which killed 6 people and injured over 1,000. The cleric, known as the Blind Sheikh, did speak out against the attack.
I know, it looks like he's wearing a Santa hat every time I see him. But this news report is very, very important. I want you guys to listen closely to who this guy is he was living in New York City, and I want you to listen to how this known terrorist, was living in our country in New York City, associated with Ramzi Youssef. Listen closely.
Omar Abdel-Rahman caught the attention of the FBI following the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center in New York, which killed 6 people and injured over 1,000. The cleric, known as the Blind Sheikh, did speak out against the attack.
I would like to condemn the bombing of the World Trade Center. Islam does not condone this kind of violence.
Several of those convicted were followers of his sermons. Abdel-Rahman had been preaching in New York since 1990, having fled Egypt, having long been accused of extremism, notably of ordering the killing of President Anwar Sadat, though he was never successfully prosecuted. Although he was on a State Department list of people connected to terrorism, not only was he allowed into the U.S., he was eventually given permanent resident status. Authorities...
Permanent residence in America. A known terrorist. Ooh, that's shocking.
As a result of his support of the Mujahideen in Afghanistan in the 1980s. Following the World Trade Center bombing, an FBI informant posing as Abdel-Rahman's bodyguard recorded the cleric discussing several plots, including the simultaneous detonation of sites in New York City, including the UN building, as well as bridges and tunnels. He wasn't charged directly with the World Trade Center attack, but with seditious conspiracy, a rarely used charge which allows for conviction for discussing, though not furthering, an attack. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole in solitary confinement. Several radical fighter groups, from al-Qaeda to armed organizations in Egypt and Algeria, have long demanded his release. Former Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi also pledged to secure Abdel-Rahman's return to Egypt on humanitarian grounds, but was ousted before following through. Speaking from Turkey, Abdel-Rahman's son alleged foul play to Al Jazeera.
They even became creative in the way they killed him slowly. In the last few days of his life, they took all of his medicine.
However, authorities say he died in a North Carolina prison after a long battle with diabetes and coronary artery disease.
Can you believe this crap? Excuse me. Can you believe this? We gave him residency, and then we prosecute him, and we throw him in a North Carolina prison in solitary confinement until he dies. And his son's like, they took all his meds. It's crazy. It's crazy. Well, I hope you guys learned something. Check this out. This is something I found last night. This is just random. I could go on and on about the bombing and stuff, but I want to show you guys. This is kind of really random and weird. It's an auction. Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols' handwriting. Look. $100 to $200. It's sold in 2021, but it's literally like someone wrote them, and look at, they have certificate of authenticity. What? I was like, what? Weird. Weird murderabilia, I guess. Murderabilia. Hang on, I think I have something else. I'm glad we got through the World Trade Center, though, because that really, to me, coincides with the Oklahoma City bombing. It's like the same, you know? Makes things that make you go, All right. Well, we'll go over Waco and Ruby Ridge in another live stream. I want to end on this note and You know, I am all about victims, 100%. I just think that the victims deserve the truth of what happened in Oklahoma City. I think that everybody deserves the truth, but even more so the victims. And I think that's just why it's so important to look at all of the details and look at everything that happened and how it all hooks together when it didn't hook together when we were younger. Because it definitely didn't all hook together for me. When I started looking into the bombing and I went up to James Nichols' farm, met him, bought his book. We went and watched Bowling for Columbine at the movie theater. I mean, he was like telling me a lot of stuff, but it didn't click then. And unfortunately, he's since passed away because he would be a wild podcast guest. But he was also I didn't get into that part. Timothy McVeigh's license had the Nichols farm on his driver's license in Michigan, and that was the first place they raided after Timothy was arrested. They went to Michigan and raided that farm, and they didn't really find much. I mean, they found some, he had fertilizer because he was a farmer. The origin of Roberta is from the Gabby Petito case, Roberta Laundrie. But anyways, I'll see you guys back here at 10:45 in about 40 minutes. We're going to be back with Letitia Stock. LaGrisha.
Miss Stouch? Miss Stouch?
All right, guys, dance it out. I'll see you in just a little bit. Thank you so much for listening this morning. And prayers and good vibes to all the victims and all the people affected by this, the firefighters, the funeral directors, the first responders, the cops, the people. Anybody who was touched by that. I mean, you got to think about it. This went through several states of people that were affected by this. I mean, I would love to tell you guys all the stories about James Nichols' mom, Terry Nichols' mom. I met her. Kindest woman. She's just a farming lady. Farming lady. Simple. Been through hell and back. I don't even know if she's still alive. And then the other Nichols brother, Les, was injured in an accident and he was caught on fire, and I think like 80% of his body is burned. So that family has really, really went through the ringer as well. But anyways, you guys, I'll see you in a little bit. Replayers, thank you for listening. I hope you learned something. Let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Did you have an eye-opening moment? Do you think it's malarkey? Let me know. I'll see you guys.
You and your problems, I don't give a damn. You talk way too much, I have heard enough. About you and your problems, I don't give a damn. I don't give a damn.
I heard him walking with like a G.
Feel something real, but I'm feeling differently. You're making plans to get to friends, but don't wanna face the fact that I ain't got time for that. Staying up late.